If you're like me, you haven't turned your oven on all summer long, because why would you, right? Here in the Carolinas, summers get up to about 100 degrees and super humid. Well, today it's 48 degrees out because it is fall, which means we're kicking off season 3 of the Bearded Home Cook right now. Are you ready? All right, so as we kick off this first episode, I decided I wanted to make the ultimate meatballs. And since it's fall, why not make them pumpkin spice? What do you think? All right, no, I'm just screwing with you. What we're gonna do is we're gonna make just a perfect Italian meatball with a simple sauce on it. As a matter of fact, I showed you how to make that sauce last year. That was part of the Sunday sauce. So we're gonna break that back out here in just a little while after we get the meatballs going. So an interesting thing is we've all seen stale bread and we've all seen store-bought breadcrumbs. You can actually hear them crunch. They taste like nothing, they're hard. This isn't something I wanna put in my food, nope. I wanna use bread that I already have at home. Some of us learned how to be bakers this summer, so hey, why not put it to good use? And you wanna take the crust off. So the fastest way to do that, get your kitchen shears and just go for a little walk around the edges. Nothing too crazy. Try to leave as much of the bread there as you can, but we don't want any of this brown stuff. Because even though it looks good and it tastes good if you eat bread with the crust on, a lot of people don't, it doesn't rehydrate in the meatball as well as you would hope. So the soft, pliable part of the bread is exactly what we're going for. So if you're anything like me, I don't want to do anything by hand if I don't have to. So I'm going to pop them into this big mouth food processor. Okay, so what I have here is what looks like a crumble now. So there's some larger pieces in there. And the reason for that is we're gonna add egg, we're gonna add milk, and I want them to be able to soak it up. If I pulverize them within an inch of their life, it's just gonna turn into like a paste. So we want something that's got a nice little bounce as it cooks. It's gonna get spongy and springy with the milk and the eggs and everything else going on in here. So this is exactly where I want it to be. I'm just gonna pour this off into a bowl and get ready for the other ingredients. So as you can see, I've moved a couple of the ingredients around. Whenever you're cooking with meat or you're cooking with eggs, unless it specifies they have to be cold right out of the refrigerator, pull them out as soon as you start getting your area ready. Because as the eggs warm up a little, the milk warms up, and the meat warms up, they're gonna become a little bit more pliable, they're gonna go together better. Meat especially, if it's ice cold when it goes into a hot oven or a hot pan, it just kind of grabs together and holds on for dear life, and you're gonna get a tough product. So we want it to warm up a little bit. I wanted to show you, we've got these nice, what I would call like a large crumble for breadcrumb. Some of them are even jumping out of the bowl. This is exactly what you want to look for, see? So if you get a little close, hit an extra pulse. If you go a little too far, guess what? It's okay. If it's your first shot making meatballs, you know what? Nobody's gonna know. It's totally fine. So I've got this back open. I'm gonna go ahead and drop in my onion and some parsley. And if you're like me, you don't like cutting up a lot of onion. Why? Because it's gonna make you cry. I'm not gonna lie, I don't need to be crying today. So we're gonna let this do the heavy lifting. Grab these two parts, and we're gonna go back to pulsing. These we want smaller than the breadcrumbs because onion, if you get a big chunk in there, it's gonna get a little bit tough. We want them to be nice and smooth. And then we're gonna add the egg in here as well to help with that. All right, if you look, we've got a nice mince. That's about as far as I can go without anything else being in here because the blade is basically pushing it all off to the side. So we're gonna pop that back down, lock the lid. Now we're gonna add our eggs. So I've said this before, I will say it 100 times. Crack your eggs into a vessel that is not your final thing. And I did this on purpose because if you were to drop this piece of shell into that batch of onions, you're never gonna find it. They're all gonna look the same and you are not gonna see it. So unfortunately, somebody's gonna crack it in their tooth and that's the end of the meatball experience. So crack them into a separate vessel, then pour them in. Put it on low, let it go. Okay, if you look in here, it looks like a nice creamed mixture. So the food processor has done a better job doing the onions than I would. It's helped beat the eggs with the onion, with the parsley. Shoot, if you want a shortcut, just pull the parsley right off the stem and drop it in there. You don't even have to chop it in advance. This makes it that much easier. If you're listening, you can also hear I've turned on the oven. I waited a little bit just so we don't hear the fan going in the background. It's a great oven, but sometimes it gets a little loud when we're filming, so I apologize if you can't hear me. I'll speak up. Just kidding. Okay, so now I'm gonna bring this big bowl out and we're gonna get into the meat. So what I have is ground chuck 80-20. Nice fat blend without being too much. I've got ground veal, phenomenal in meatballs. And then I have ground pork. They look a lot alike, but I promise you these are what they are. And the reason I'm using 3 meats is if you do all ground beef, it's gonna be tough. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast. Veal is a nice tender meat, and then pork just adds a nice flavor. You can use a mild Italian sausage in place of this, but you have to take that into account when you're doing your seasoning, because unfortunately, what's in that sausage is out of your control. So I start with a ground pork, and then I season it in myself. Make sense? Great. I'm gonna put this in here, and we're gonna get rolling. So what I'm gonna do is just sort of push these down so that some of the new ingredients will incorporate to the middle, because then we're gonna fold it in. You don't wanna overwork your product while it's in here, because then you're gonna make the meat tough as well. We just added these wonderful other meats so that the beef doesn't get too tough. So let's not turn around and defeat ourselves by doing that. We'll pop off this delicious mixture. Hold on to your blade. Those things love to just drop out. There we go. Get all this yummy stuff out of here. Yum, yum, yum. And these onions don't make me cry. Not sure why I'm singing. Maybe it's because we're making meatballs. Not gonna lie. One of my favorite foods. Alrighty. From here, we're gonna go ahead and add approximately 1 cup of breadcrumb. Now, dried breadcrumbs 1 cup and fresh breadcrumbs 1 cup really don't add up the same. I'm gonna leave a little in here as a reserve. The dry ones are gonna soak up so much more liquid than the fresh ones will, so we've gotta kind of account for that. So I'm trying to start just sort of incorporating these ingredients before I add the milk, just to get a feel for what kind of texture I have. So I'm gonna start with this, just to sort of work it in, and then the hands go in. So as a kid, this was my favorite part of making meatballs, meatloaf, everything. I don't know why. I like things that were a little bit gooey. It was fun to play with it. Maybe that's why I like playing with Play-Doh so much and bread dough and everything else. Okay, so if you look, we're fairly well incorporated. I haven't added a lot of pressure to anything yet because I don't want to really make this beef tough. So we're already kind of liquid. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna add my Parmesan, and then I'm gonna add half of the milk that I intend to. You can't take the milk back out. We can add more breadcrumb to soak it up if we go a little heavy, but it's much easier to add the milk slowly than to try and alter your recipe for it. So here we have our 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. It's a very dry ingredient, so a lot of the liquid that's still kind of hanging around, making this a little bit looser, is gonna start to tighten up. Then we'll add the garlic, then we'll add the milk, and we've got ourselves a meatball. Okay, so again, you can kind of see it holds its shape pretty well. It's a little bit drier than we want it to be. So I'm just gonna push it down in the middle. Sprinkle in the garlic, pour in half of our milk. So I've got a 1/2 cup in here. I'm gonna only put in 1/4 cup to start. The good news is I've got a treat for the finish. So if we have a little bit of milk left in that cup, I have a place to use it. You don't have to worry about wasting it, I promise. Oh yeah, this is perfect. All right, with the food processing out of the way, I've got a little bit more room to work. I'm gonna go ahead and use a 9x13 non-stick baking sheet. Now there's enough fat in these that you could use a conventional baking sheet, you could use a glass one, whatever. I like a non-stick for the simple fact that if these get a little crusty on the bottom, which is always possible, they just pop right off and they're super, super easy. Plus we're gonna add sauce to the pan while it's in the oven. And again, sauce on something that isn't non-stick can really hang in there a little bit and it's a lot of extra work. I like to just rinse the pan off and be done. So this recipe should yield 9 to 12 meatballs, depending on the size you like. I, for the sake of cook time and getting an extra couple to eat while I'm cooking, because it's just way more fun that way, I make them a little bit bigger than a ping pong ball, but definitely smaller than a tennis ball. So we're just kind of in this 2.5 inch range, give or take. I'm gonna go ahead and start popping these in here. Rolling's probably the most fun I'm gonna have. So I'm just gonna get after this for a little bit, get them all placed with a little bit of space in between them, and then we're gonna get these babies in the oven. I'll see you back here in just a second. And there you have it, y'all. 12 perfectly sized, perfectly spaced meatballs. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and wash up, give you a quick sneak peek of what these look like before they go in the oven, and then of course we're gonna go ahead and get our timer set up. So back in 1 more second. All right, our oven's hit temperature. I've got these beautiful meatballs in here, ready to go in the oven. making sure my spacing is good, because we want to allow that heat and air to circulate all the way around. If you've ever had two meatballs together, or really any kind of a meat, when they're touching, they don't get that nice browning on them, and we want these to be nice and brown before we add the sauce. Plus, it could also halt some of the cooking if they're touching, because then it makes their mass larger. So again, we're going to start the oven off at about 20 minutes. I'm going to explain to you why in just a second. You can see we've got some nice spacing between all of these, so I'm going to get them in, get the timer going, then we're going to talk a little bit more. Okay, so I said we were going to talk about it, right? So the meatballs are in. What's there to talk about? They're cooking. Well, I did a size, like I said, about 2.5 inches. That's probably going to take in the area of 20 to 25 minutes to cook. It may even go as far as 30. Really, it's all subject to, again, different ovens, cooking different ways, and the size of your meatball. So if you make yours a little bit larger, we're going to go with a slightly higher time. If you make them a little smaller, we're going to go with a lower time. So I set my timer for 20, expecting to reset it, if I need to, for another 5 to 8 minutes. You never want to set it at the full time of 30 or 40, especially for the larger ones, because then you could overcook them, and all of that effort you just did to put the milk and the egg and the different meats in there to keep them moist and tender is completely out the door. They're dried up and drizzly. So, meatballs. How do you present meatballs and not put them on a pasta like we did for episode 1, season 1? Cover them in a sauce like we did with the Sunday sauce episode. Well, we're going to put sauce on there, but we're also going to put ricotta cheese. Okay, why? It's a whole fat cheese that's going to add a great rich creaminess to the plate, because we're going to present these as an appetizer. Yes, put them on pasta, have a family dinner, let everybody eat 3 or 4 of them, great. But this ricotta cheese with a little bit of salt and a little bit of milk kind of gets nice and creamy and fatty, and as you grab that with the sauce, with the meatball, you've got this trifecta of delicious on your fork. So I've got a small whisk here. I'm just going to loosen up the ricotta cheese. I've got about a cup in here. It's definitely more than I'm going to need to serve today, but I want to make sure that you're looking at something that's realistic to what you're going to make. So ricotta cheese as a whole has a slightly grainy texture to it, and that's where presenting it as it is sometimes doesn't work. So first off, it really lacks flavor. So we're going to put in about 1/2 teaspoon of salt to start, and just a touch of milk. So I told you we'd use this. Now you see why. And we don't want it to get super thin, because then when we plate it, it's just going to run everywhere. And if you look, it falls off because it's heavy, but it's not thin and runny. So if I pull a spoon out to show it to you, it'll come off, but it's thick, and this is what we want. Tiny bit more salt. And then put this back in the fridge. Meatballs are going to come out hot. Sauce is going to be hot. Keep this cheese cold. We want it to sit on that plate in its exact location as long as we can. All right. So at 20 minutes, our dozen meatballs are browning, but they're not exactly where I want them. So I am totally comfortable going back for another 5 minutes, knowing I'll get some browning. And then once I add the sauce, it's going to really take things up to a whole new level. So 5 more minutes, we'll come back, we'll add some sauce, we'll be very happy. See you then. Okay, just pulled them out of the oven. Got some nice golden browning going on the top. So one of the things that you don't want to do is you've got all these drippings, even though some of them have a lot of flavor, you don't want all of this runoff, fat and otherwise, to go into this beautiful sauce that you're heating and putting in here, which, yes, heating. So I've taken my Sunday sauce, which I froze months ago, because obviously I love this stuff and I'm going to eat it year round. Heated it up in advance, because we don't want to put cold sauce into a hot pan. If it's Pyrex, the glass will actually explode. But in this case, I just want to keep the cooking process going so the oven stays on. I'm going to pull these meatballs off, put them on a plate, clean out the bottom of this pan quickly, get everything back into the oven for probably about 10 more minutes, and it's time to eat. So let me go ahead and get this going, and we'll be right back. Okay, so a lot of times I don't show you the cleanup process, but this one I think is important, because this is kind of my public service announcement. I've got one of the bowls from earlier in here. I've got all this fat and liquid and some runnings, and I'm gonna go ahead and just wipe this out into the bowl. Why I'm doing it into the bowl is because you don't want to run this down your drain. Grease in your drain is probably one of the worst things you can do. And in major cities, it's a tremendous problem because they just can't account for it in the sewage system. So if you have a septic tank in the country, kind of like our area, it's even worse because it's there forever. So go ahead and wipe it out into a bowl, then put that into your garbage when it cools. We're gonna go ahead and put our meatballs back into this pan, get our sauce ready, and get back in the oven. So that's my PSA for today. So we're just gonna go ahead and start putting some sauce on. And I'm not worried about how much sauce I'm gonna have in the bottom of the pan. I wanna be sure the entire meatball surface is covered. Doesn't take very long. Keep your oven on. We're gonna go back for 5 to 10 minutes, again, depending on the size of your meatball and how warm your sauce is. And then we're gonna be ready to serve. So we'll pop these back in and I'll see you right back. Okay, so in all fairness, I did tell you that I always make a little extra on the meatball so I can do a taste. So no offense for everybody watching at home. I'm gonna go ahead and cut into that. You can tell I barely even pushed on it with the fork and off comes this beautiful chunk. Still steamy and delicious. The onion is just enough garlic. Super soft and tender. The funny thing is you can't even tell that the breadcrumbs and the egg and the milk are in there, but the tenderness of the meat and the juiciness that still remains, a little bit of juice is actually even running out. So that tells you just how moist these meatballs are. So I'm gonna stop being a bad guy. I'm gonna go ahead and get these puppies into the plate and give you something to look at. All right. Now, I've got that ricotta, creamed it nicely. You can see, super nice and thick, taking it out of the refrigerator. Just gonna go ahead, drop some down in the bottom. And what you would do is basically take a chunk of meatball, scoop your fork into the ricotta, and eat it. Okay. Drop a little parsley, a little bit of shaved Parmesan and Asiago. I don't like those powdery cheeses. I like things shaved. They just look so much better, especially for display. And there you have it, guys. I love meatballs. I hope you do too. So here is an extra tender, delicious meatball you can serve for family gatherings or eat the whole dozen yourself. I don't care. I probably will. But I've got a couple of neighbors that said they were hungry, so we're gonna drop these off here in just a little bit. If you like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Season 3 is off to the races. Don't forget the menu and everything in the ingredient list and how to do it is gonna be on the website, thebeardedhomecook.com. Follow us on the social channels. Let's have some fun, let's engage. This is really gonna be a season all about family meals because for the last several months, that's something we really haven't had as much of. So let's get back to making things that are big and hearty, and even if you can't sit down and eat them together, pack them up and deliver them. Man, what a great thing it is if you knock on somebody's door, leave a plate for them, and let them enjoy something like these crazy meatballs. Appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.